joining this morning. I'm just going to share my slides uh, to get us started. So what I'm going to talk about today is really just give you an update on some recent announcements in terms of the UK's immigration system. Many of you will have seen that the government released an immigration white paper last month. It was something we've been waiting on since the end of November last year. So it's good to finally see it. But what I'm going to do today is just talk you through some of the main proposals that are set out in the white paper that will affect organisations and employers in the United Kingdom who use the immigration system to help bring in staff to their workforce. So, in terms of the key changes that are going to affect business, a summary of those are basically some changes to the work routes that we have for bringing people in to the UK. We've got some changes for the graduate visa routes. We've also got some changes around the English language requirements that are expected for individuals coming into the UK for overseas work purposes. The pathways to settlement or permanent residence and citizenship for individuals coming to the UK from overseas is also proposed to change. And then lastly, I think an area for concern for employers, and this is regardless of whether you're sponsoring work visas or not, anyone who's an employer needs to know about planned changes to immigration enforcement that are expected to come in the near future. So before we start looking at each of these kind of proposals in a bit more detail, what I do want to say is that they are just that at this point in time. They are proposals. The white paper has not made any immediate changes to the UK immigration system. A lot of the changes contained in the white paper, if they are to come into force, will require either an amendment to the immigration rules as they currently stand, or in some cases changes to primary legislation. So if they are coming in, we should normally receive a warning to changes to the immigration rules. Sometimes the government will bring them in effective immediately, but in most cases we do get a few weeks of notice so that if there's anything that would potentially affect you and your business, you've got some time to act on it before the changes come into effect. And then obviously primary legislation takes time. So anyway, we'll have a look at it and see where the direction of travel is going to be taking us in the next few months. So if we start by looking at the changes to the work routes, these are probably the changes that are most likely to affect your organisations as employers. And I think the biggest change is coming in when we're looking at changes to the skilled worker route. So the skilled worker route is the route that is most used by organisations to hire international workers to work within the business. At the moment, you can sponsor someone if you have a sponsor license to do a job that is an eligible occupation, and that basically means it's classed as a skilled role, so it's deemed to be an adequate skill level to justify sponsorship. In the proposals under the white paper, the plans are to increase the skill level for sponsorship. So at the moment, skill level can be level 3, which is equivalent to A level kind of standard. And the plans are to increase the minimum skill level to degree level. Now, that wouldn't mean that the individual workers themselves would have to have a degree qualification, but rather their occupation, their role has been assessed at being at that kind of level of skill. Now, for those of you that are fully kind of immersed in the sponsorship system and been doing it for a number of years, this will not be unfamiliar territory because it was the level of skill that was required for visa sponsorship pre-Brexit. So under the Tier 2 migrant scheme, which was the predecessor to the skilled worker scheme, this is the kind of skill level you were looking at. So it's about taking it back to that higher level. But what it does mean is that there's nearly 200 roles that are currently eligible for sponsorship that if the skill level drops will fall out of eligibility. So it would be a good idea to have a look at your own roles that you offer sponsorship for to see whether they could potentially be impacted by these changes. The next change is a change in terms of the lower skilled roles. So at the moment we have something called an immigration salary list, which was only brought in last year. And this is for shortage occupations. It replaced the shortage occupation list. And there's some benefits to being on that list for shortage roles. there's a salary discount that applies. Well, under the proposals, the immigration salary list is going to be short-lived. It's going to be abolished, and instead the plan is to replace it with something called a temporary shortage occupation list. So this is for those roles that are levels 3 to 5, so below degree level, that would no longer be eligible. They could, however, be eligible under the temporary shortage occupation list, but this is very much a time limited um, option. So roles will be assessed as to whether they should be placed on this temporary shortage list for a time limited period. The government will be looking to the Migration Advisory Committee, which is the body that advises government on immigration policy, to see what their views as to whether which roles should be placed on the list. And to get on that list, what we're told is that the sectors that the roles are in are going to have in place some sort of workplace strategy, so that they can show that they've got plans in place to make more effort for training up and bringing on workers from the domestic workforce. And also it's going to have to be for critical roles that are relevant to what the government is looking to achieve in terms of their own industrial strategy as well. So it's not just a case of people saying we need these people to do certain jobs in the UK. There's going to be an additional level of requirements for a role to be classed as critical enough to be put on that list in the first place. The other thing with the transition to this temporary shortage occupation list is that the workers that come in under this route will not be allowed to bring their dependents. Now, we've seen a restriction on certain skilled workers being able to bring their dependents to the UK in recent times. So last year there was a restriction added to care workers and senior care workers, preventing them from bringing their dependents. And what we saw with that actually is quite a steep reduction in the number of applications being made by individuals to come into the UK to do those roles, because obviously, if someone's going to come here and make that big change in life, they're going to want to bring their family more times than not. So this could also just have a general impact on an organisation's ability to find and hire the right worker, because even if it's on that shortage list, will people be deterred from moving to the UK if they're not able to bring their family with them? The next big change, and this is going to have a massive impact on the health and social care sector, is the ending of overseas recruitment for care workers. So the care sector has got a lot of heat in recent times as a result of the use of the immigration system to fill vacancies. It's not been helped by the fact that there have been rogue actors operating in that sector, and there has been quite a lot of reports of exploitation of workers, in some instances having individuals charge thousands of pounds to come and work in the sector and to get their visa. So that's not unsurprising. But there's lots of organisations there that are doing the right thing and are very much dependent on overseas workers to fill these roles. And when this announcement was made in terms of the white paper, reports were showing that there was over 130,000 vacancies within the sector. So if we're taking away the option of using migrant workers to help fill some of these vacancies, then there's a real concern as to how that sector is going to function and be able to be fully staffed going forward. And what the plans say is that there will be some sort of level of transitional provisions in place up until 2028. So that would allow those workers that are already in the UK to continue to apply for extensions or to switch into the skilled worker category to do these types of jobs. But we're also told that that will be kept under review. So quite an area of concern, particularly for the healthcare sector. And so we'll need to see how that pans out. Because a lot of the, Care Scotland and a lot of the other membership organisations have been very vocal about the damage that these kind of changes could do to that sector. So again, we'll need to see how the changes are implemented, if at all. And the next change is to do with the costs of visa sponsorship. So at the moment, anyone who is sponsoring workers to come within their organisation will pay certain fees. So there's the fee for sponsorship, which is the certificate of sponsorship, which is just over £500. But companies will also pay something called the immigration skills charge, which is basically a levy placed on employers for hiring overseas workers, and the amount of that will depend on the size of the company. So it's either £364 per year or £1,000 per year. And the plans are to increase that by 32%. So that will be a massive, increase in the costs of visa sponsorship, particularly when you think that at present, ordinarily, you'd be looking at a 5-year cycle of sponsoring someone before they'd be eligible for settlement and no longer require sponsorship from you. So that would be a cost if it comes in to factor into your recruitment budgets if you are planning to hire someone who requires visa sponsorship. Now, they're all kind of negatives, I would say, for businesses, changes that will impact your ability to use the work routes. But there are some proposals to make other visa routes more attractive and more user friendly. And this is reserved really for the routes that bring in very highly skilled individuals. So we have a number of different routes. One of them is the global talent route. So this is a non-sponsored work route. So this is where an individual would apply to an endorsing body to recognise that they have exceptional promise or exceptional talent within their sector. And one of the current endorsing bodies is the Royal Academy of Engineering. So amongst the plans, the government has said that it's going to try and simplify this route and make it easier for top talent to make use of the route. So if that route does become more accessible to individuals, then it could reduce the potential for employers needing to sponsor people and having people within the sector being able to come and work in the UK without that additional level of sponsorship. There's going to be an increase in funding in places on internship programs, which will include some scientific and engineering type roles. And also there's a route called the Innovator Founder route, which wouldn't necessarily assist employers necessarily, but it is a route for entrepreneurs setting up an innovative business in the UK if they can show it's viable and it's scalable. But it does also create jobs. It allows people to qualify for settlement and then go on and work in the workplace if they wanted to. So there's plans to try and revamp that and see what can be done to help, particularly international students, to take those with ideas that are wanting to start up the business here and kind of support them to do that. So again, very light on the detail as to how that's going to happen in the white paper. So a lot of this are kind of, the information that's set out are very much headlines without so much of the detail being provided at this time. So again, we'll need to wait and see what happens with that. Moving on, we've got graduates. So the graduate route is probably a route that a lot of you will come across. It's where an international student will come to the UK, complete their course of study, and then once they've successfully completed that course, they can apply for a 2-year post-study work visa, and that allows people to take employment. I know certainly from clients of mine, it helps particularly for organisations who maybe have a graduate scheme. They'll take on graduates into the workforce. They will use that time that the individual's on the 2-year work visa to see how they settle into the role, whether they are someone that the company can see them hiring and employing for a longer term, see whether they're a good fit and actually want to then take the step to support that individual to remain in post and potentially sponsor their work visa. So it is a good opportunity for both parties to get to know each other and see how the role fits with them. At the moment, a graduate has a 2-year post-study work visa available to them, but the plans are to reduce the post-study work period for graduates from 2 years to 18 months. So that really gives both parties less time to really make that decision as to whether sponsorship is something that would work for both the company and for the individual, which isn't really ideal. On the flip side to that, we have another route for graduates called the high potential individual visa. Now, this is different to the graduate route in that it is aimed at international graduates, i.e. graduates of overseas universities, right? So at present, graduates from the top 50 ranked non-UK universities are eligible to apply for this visa, and it gives them a 2-year work visa in the UK. Now, the white paper said that the government intends to double the number of eligible institutions, so therefore making this route available to more individuals from overseas. So in one sense, that's a good thing. There's potentially more engineering graduates, for example, from overseas top engineering institutions overseas that would be eligible to come to the UK and work. But it's going to be interesting to see if that does come in, what impact it would have on the graduate route within the UK, because it seems to then create an incentive to study outside the UK as opposed to inside the UK, which could potentially have an impact also on the number of international students wanting to come to the UK, which, given the importance of international student fees for organisations, could be something that could be quite detrimental both to the university system, but just the wider economy. So I think that's also something we need to keep an eye on. But in terms of sourcing graduates from overseas, there could be a higher number of eligible individuals that could be applying for jobs in the UK and not requiring sponsorship to come to the UK to do those roles. The next change is to English language requirements. So at present, people coming to the UK on work routes or applying to stay generally have to meet an English language requirement. So they will prove to the Home Office that they can speak English to a level B1 level in the Common European Framework. That's kind of intermediate level. They would show that they can meet that level at all 4 components, so reading, writing, speaking and listening. The plans are to increase the level of English to level B2. Now that could be problematic particularly if you have applicants who are at that stage or they're ready to make an application to come to the UK or to apply to extend their permission in the UK, and they're all of a sudden having to meet a higher English language standard. So practically it just might be a bit of a pain and cause delay, because whatever evidence the individual has may be at that lower skill level, so they may be required to incur additional costs and time in taking a new qualifying English language test. Or it may be that they're not quite at that next level, in which case it could just derail their visa application at that time until they can get to a stage where they're able to take and pass a test at the higher level. So I think in terms of if that change is coming in and you're mid kind of preparing visa applications for individuals, then I would look to maybe see if you could bring those applications forward, so that you can avoid any increase in the requirement to meet that English level, and make sure that there's no issues with those applications being approved. The next change is also to bring in an English language requirement for dependents. So again, this isn't something that we currently have. So someone coming to the UK as a skilled worker is able to bring their dependent partner and their children with them. Neither has to meet an English language requirement, so that the worker can come, do their role, their dependent can work or not. They can choose, what they want to do. Plans are to introduce an English language requirement for adult dependents. And it is A1, which is your kind of basic kind of beginner's level. But it's new, and so there will be candidates who will not be able to come or will be deterred from coming because their partner is not able to meet that English language requirement and they're not prepared to be separated. So again, something to keep an eye on. And if people are being hired by your organisations and are telling you they want to bring dependents with them, it's about flagging this potential requirement and then having a discussion as to whether that might be an issue or not. The English language requirement is also increasing, or plans to increase, for settlement applications. So that's the applications for permanent residence after a set period of residence in the UK. And that moves us on to that next requirement, which is the question of settlement or permanent residence. So at the moment, as I said, after a period of 5 years, workers will generally be eligible to apply for indefinite leave to remain or settlement in the UK. And the proposals are saying that the government intends to double the qualifying period for settlement to 10 years. Now, we've had a lot of inquiries already about this since the white paper was published, because there's just a lot of anxiety and concern from individuals, particularly individuals that are already in the UK. And so you might see this amongst your own workforce if you have workers who are on sponsored visas, because the white paper does not say whether this will apply only to people coming in after these kind of changes come into force, or whether it will apply to those individuals that are already here. Now, normally we have some kind of transitional provisions where there are big changes like this. So, people that are already on the route will normally be protected from the changes. The white paper is silent on this at all. And after a few days after the white paper was published, there was a news story as well in the BBC saying that subject to undergoing a public consultation, the plan is that these changes would apply to everyone, including those already here. Now, what that means for employers is that you have a cost associated with visa sponsorship, and that cost at the moment is time limited for 5 years. If you're wanting to retain those workers on the longer term, you're looking at doubling your costs in terms of your certificate of sponsorship fees, your skill surcharge fees, for 10 years rather than 5 years, which again is really quite significant. There is a possibility, according to the white paper, of accelerated settlement. So there are some routes, for example, at the moment where accelerated settlement is an option. So the global talent route, the innovative route, individuals on those routes may have the possibility of applying for a settlement after 3 years. So maybe there'll be something similar, but all we're told is that option for accelerated settlement will depend on the individual's contribution to the economy and to society, but we don't know what that actually will look like. So this change will be subject to public consultation. We're told that the consultation will happen towards the end of this year. So I think it's definitely something to look out for and to feed into, because it could have potential ramifications for your employees, but also your business costs as well in terms of continued sponsorship. Just as an aside, which isn't to do with sponsorship, but if you do have any workers within your organisations who are here on other types of visas, so like a spouse visa or family-based visas, dependents on British citizens, we are told that the current 5-year settlement pathway for those individuals will stay at 5 years and won't increase. So that at least is a good indication for those individuals. Equally, the next step after settlement for individuals is citizenship, and because of an increase in the pathway to settlement, the timeline for somebody applying for citizenship will also increase, because you have to have, in most cases, a settlement in the first instance before you apply for citizenship. So that will affect those individuals as well. Okay, and then the next thing and last sort of area that I wanted to mention, and it's something that is really important, as I said at the beginning, for organisations, whether you're sponsors or whether you are just employing people that are non-British citizens, and this is changes to immigration enforcement and compliance. And we've seen since the current government came in last year, a massive increase in the amount of immigration enforcement activity going on, and that is just going to continue. Okay, so it's really important that employers are really up to date with the current right to work regime, making sure that everything that you are doing internally before you onboard your employees is in line with the Home Office requirements, because of the consequences for getting it wrong. But under the white paper, we've seen a couple of additional changes to immigration enforcement. So the first is plans to establish something called a fair work agency, and I mentioned earlier some of the exploitation that had been uncovered of workers in the UK, and so the fair work agency is to be established to basically coordinate the ability for stronger action to be taken against employers that are found to be exploiting workers. So we'll be looking to tackle any kind of breaches of employment rights and investigate organisations that are flouting the rules and are exploiting individuals. And the next big plan, and this affects all employers, is plans to extend the extension of extend the liability for civil penalties. So at the moment, employers have a duty to prevent illegal working, right? So basically ensuring that nobody is working within your business who requires immigration permission and doesn't have it, or doesn't have the right conditions permitting them to work in the UK. And the consequences of not complying with that duty is that you can face civil and criminal sanctions. Okay, so a civil penalty for illegal working, the starting point is either 45 or 60,000 pounds per illegal worker. So one worker is awful, you know, to get that level of penalty. But if you have got multiple individuals who are working without permission, then the level of fines, it just racks up really, really quickly. And really, because of the level of fines we're at now, they went up last year to these new levels. It can be the difference between the business continuing to operate or not. But the scheme at the moment, as it is set out in legislation, applies to an employer-employee relationship only. Okay, but plans under the white paper are to extend that even further. So we're looking at extending it to non-employee workers, to self-employed contractors, and those on online job matching platforms. Um, and what we've got is we've got the border security bill making its way through Parliament at the moment. After the white paper was published last month, there was an amendment made to the bill. An additional clause was added to that bill to basically cover this extension of liability. And so that'll be a big shift change for organisations, because you're used to carrying out right to work checks on employees, but not on other workers coming in to the business. So it's going to be really important to keep an eye on those changes. And then lastly, the next thing is an increased focus on enforcement raids. So this is where immigration officers are going out and visiting organisations. Either they've had tip-offs or they are going in just on the off chance that they will discover some kind of individuals that are working on the premises and don't have permission to work. There's been 1,000 staff redeployed into immigration enforcement since the Labour government came into force. They are under the white paper. There's plans to provide more resources to these teams again. So we're looking at larger teams being on the ground. They're going to be given new technology, so they'll have body-worn cameras. They will have biometric. Mobile biometric systems, so being able to check instantly, you know, somebody's identity, checking whether they've got permission to work, and then basically taking action to issue civil penalties against employers if the individuals don't have permission to work in the UK. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. Okay, so just to finish up, I just want to leave you with some thoughts and some sort of practical tips as to what you can do within your organisation in light of the white paper and the proposed changes. So I think the first thing you can do is sign up for Home Office updates, sign up for the Migration Advisory Committee updates, because there will be consultations on a lot of these changes, and it's going to be important to feed into that. We've just had a Migration Advisory Committee report issued that affects the engineering sector. So they carried out a review recently. Well, they were asked to do it last year, and they've just published a review on IT and engineering roles, and to see how the immigration system was being used. That was published after the white paper by the MAC, and it basically found that there was no over-reliance on the immigration system to fill these roles, that the roles were generally highly skilled, and so the net contribution was positive of migrant workers coming in. So it didn't really, I'm not sure that the MAC and the government with the white paper were really on the same page when it came to what they had found. But I think it is quite important that you have the opportunity to feed into any of these consultations going forward, particularly the increase to settlement for your workers going forward as well, from 5 to 10 years. I think the next thing, you need to take a look internally at the roles that you have, that you turned to immigration, if at all, for sponsorship, and see what you can do in terms of your own training, whether it's apprenticeships or having training programs to have a pipeline for you to bring on new workers in the future, because as the immigration system evolves, there's going to be more focus on what you're doing within the sector to deal with any skill shortages through training of the domestic workforce. Have a look at the roles that you sponsor. See whether they are deemed to be degree level or not. Will they be affected by possible changes in the skill level for sponsorship? If they will be, what can you do now, to try and ensure that you have people coming through that will be able to fill those roles without turning to sponsorship? Look at the costs of sponsorship within the organisation. How many employees do you have? What will an increase in the immigration skills charge mean for your costs as a business? And factor that into your budgets going forward. And I think really the big takeaway for this as well, I think for everyone, regardless of whether you sponsor or not, is to review your right to work and your onboarding process. Make sure that you're following the Home Office right to work guidance, that you're carrying out the checks, which for majority of overseas workers will be online checks with the Home Office. Make sure you have a process in place for carrying out repeat checks. So these will be needed for people on time limited visas, that you're retaining your records, that your record keeping is up to date. Don't be blasé about it. I've seen a massive increase in the amount of new inquiries and instructions we're getting on this. And one thing is clear is that it's not just about organisations being raided by the Home Office that this is happening to. It's happening on the basis of information sharing, whereby information is being passed by government departments to the Home Office. So, for example, HMRC have got pay records coming in of someone that's being paid by an organisation. They're being taxed and paying national insurance, and they don't have the right to work. That information is getting passed to the Home Office, and that's being used to start off the civil penalty process. So the fact you've not got a visit from the Home Office doesn't mean to say you're fine. It could still happen. And take a look and see as well who's working in the organisation. Do you already check everyone that walks through the door that might be doing work for you, whether they're an employee or not? If you don't, what are you going to do to change your processes? Because as I said, the bill that's going through Parliament now is being amended to deal with extending the right to work regime. So you need to be prepared for that. And then lastly, if you do have staff within the workforce, as I said, there has been a lot of anxiety. We've had individuals contacting us already to ask about the plans to extend their time for settlement. Decide on what if you're going to communicate with individuals about that, whether you will be continuing to sponsor people in the longer term. But to do that, really, I think, as I said, sign up to our updates with the Home Office, because then you'll be best informed. When people are coming to you, you'll have that information readily to hand to say, this is what the plans are, this is the timeline, will you be affected or not? But yeah, that is it. That is in a nutshell a very whistle-stop tour of the immigration white paper and the planned changes. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take some questions.
Someone had asked in the chat, Ashley, if it'd be possible to get a copy of the slides afterwards.
Absolutely, that's fine. I'll pass them to Amy, and then Amy can distribute to anyone that would like a copy. That's not a problem at all.
Okay, thank you very much. And do we have any other questions? Are we just all wait to check our right to work check processes?
Yeah, it's not worth it. I mean, the biggest fine I think I saw